The gentle morning sunlight streams through the window, softly illuminating my face. As usual, I wake up before the alarm clock rings. Even at 62, the habit from my 30 years as a high school teacher is hard to shake off. "Good morning, Eleanor," my husband George greets me with a sleepy voice from beside me. At 65, he still maintains his early rising habit from his days as a police officer, even after retirement. "Good morning, George." "Another beautiful day," I smile in response as I get up from bed. I open the curtains and take in the morning view of Cedarville, Ohio. It's a small college town of about 4,000 people, but it exudes a peaceful atmosphere with its lush greenery. As I prepare breakfast, I mentally organize today's schedule. Our son Mike and daughter-in-law Sarah are heading off to work, so we'll be looking after our 2-year-old grandson, Jacob. Mike is busy as a researcher at a major pharmaceutical company, while Sarah works at a local real estate agency. Helping the young couple balance work and childcare is one of the joys of being grandparents. "George, don't forget we're watching Jacob today," I remind him. "Oh, of course. I'm looking forward to it." George looks up from his newspaper with a smile. Taking care of our grandson has become one of our greatest pleasures in life. After breakfast, I take a walk around the neighborhood. I exchange greetings with neighbors along the way. "Good morning, Eleanor." Early as always, I see Mrs. Johnson calls out while tending to her garden. "Good morning, Linda." "Your garden looks lovely," I reply. "Thank you. I'm planning to sell some of these flowers at the church bazaar," she says. It's moments like these that remind me of the strong sense of community here. We've lived in Cedarville for over 40 years, and this warm community has become our cherished home. When I return home, I receive a call from Sarah. "Good morning, Mom. We'll be dropping off Jacob soon," she says. "Of course, Sarah. Don't worry about a thing," I assure her. As I hang up, I feel a slight twinge of mixed emotions. My relationship with Sarah isn't bad, but sometimes I sense differences in our values. We occasionally disagree on small things like child-rearing methods or household role division. However, for the sake of family harmony, I always try my best to be understanding. Just before noon, Mike brings Jacob over. "Mom, thanks again for today. We'll pick him up in the evening," he says. "All right, Mike. Take care," I reply. As I embrace Jacob, I feel warmth spread through my heart at my young grandson's innocent smile. "Grandma." Jacob laughs gleefully, throwing his arms around my neck. In the afternoon, while playing with Jacob in the garden, some neighborhood children join us. The sound of children's laughter fills the air, creating a peaceful atmosphere. "Eleanor, how about some tea?" George calls from the porch. "Thank you, George," I reply gratefully. We sit on the porch, watching our grandson and the neighborhood children play, enjoying a tranquil moment together. Our retirement life is filled with these small moments of happiness. In the evening, when Mike comes to pick up Jacob, he looks a bit tired. "What's wrong, Mike? Is something bothering you?" I ask, concerned. "Oh, it's nothing, Mom. Just busy at work. He trails off. I'm a bit worried about my son's demeanor, but I decide not to press further. The young couple must have their own concerns. As I lie in bed that night, I reflect on the day. Even in our peaceful daily life, I sense small worries and changes affecting each family member. I wonder what tomorrow will bring as I quietly close my eyes. After finishing my morning routine, I was waiting in the living room for Jacob to arrive. Mike's tired appearance yesterday was still on my mind, and I thought I'd try to have a more detailed conversation with him today. Outside the window, the soft early summer sunlight gently illuminated the streets of Cedarville. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Looking at the clock, I realized it was too early for Mike to arrive. I wonder who that could be, I thought as I headed towards the door. When I opened the door, 2 police officers were standing there. One was a man in his 50s, and the other was a younger woman in her 30s. They were both in uniform, but something felt off. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. We're here to discuss a matter with you," the older officer said. "Yes, what can I help you with?" I asked, feeling a bit tense. "Can we talk inside?" the young female officer asked. There was a hint of urgency in her voice that I found unsettling. I led them into the living room. As I gestured for them to sit on the sofa, they settled down with a somewhat uneasy air. "We're here on a rather delicate matter," the older officer began. His expression was grave. "What's happened?" I asked, feeling anxious. "An arrest warrant has been issued for your grandson, Jacob Thompson." The moment I heard those words, my mind went blank. "What? What did you say?" My voice rose involuntarily. Surely there must be some mistake. "Jacob is only 2 years old," I said, desperately trying to make sense of the situation. The older officer cleared his throat and said, "We understand that this is an unusual situation. However, we have our orders." Confusion and questions were swirling in my mind. An arrest warrant for a 2-year-old child. How could that be possible? Even when George was in the police force, I'd never heard of anything like this. What exactly is he being charged with? I asked, trying to maintain my composure. The young female officer answered, "We can't disclose the details, but we have information suggesting involvement in a serious economic crime." Hearing those words, I became even more bewildered. A 2-year-old child involved in an economic crime. It made absolutely no sense. This must be a mistake. Jacob is truly just a 2-year-old child. He can't even count money by himself, let alone commit an economic crime, I explained desperately. The 2 officers exchanged glances. I sensed something akin to nervousness in their demeanor. "Mrs. Thompson, we understand the unusual nature of this situation. However, we have orders from above." The older officer began, but the younger one interjected. "Actually, there is a way to resolve this situation," she said. I listened intently. "If you pay bail, we won't need to take Jacob into custody," the young officer explained. "Bail? How much?" I asked, trying to maintain my composure despite my agitation. $100,000. I gasped when I heard the amount. $100,000. Such a large sum, I couldn't possibly. We can arrange for installments. $30,000 now, and the rest can be paid later, the older officer quickly added. The feeling that something was very wrong grew stronger within me. Police procedures couldn't possibly be this simple. And the behavior of these two officers was strange. Could I have some time to think about this? I'd like to consult with my husband, I said, trying to buy some time. The two officers visibly tensed. But this is an urgent matter. I understand. But we're talking about a large sum of money. I need a little time, I said firmly. The officers reluctantly stood up. All right, we'll return in 2 hours. Please make your decision by then. As I saw them off, various questions were swirling in my mind. Was this really an official procedure? Why would there be an arrest warrant for a 2-year-old child? And were these two really police officers? After closing the door, I took a deep breath. I needed to think calmly. First, I should call George. He would know about police procedures. And I needed to contact Mike and Sarah too. As I reached for the phone, I felt a sense of unease along with a premonition that something big was about to happen. I let out a deep sigh as I hung up the phone. My conversation with George had made the abnormality of this situation even clearer. Eleanor, listen carefully. George's voice had maintained its usual calm. First of all, it's almost impossible for an arrest warrant to be issued for a 2-year-old child. Also, the police would never directly demand bail money. This is most likely a scam. Recalling George's words, I started jotting down notes. I listed the suspicious points about the two individuals posing as police officers, the slight oddity in their uniforms, their nervous behavior, their demand for immediate bail payment. As I wrote each point down, it became increasingly clear how many suspicious elements there were. Looking out the window, I saw Mrs. Johnson working in her garden. She might have noticed something. I went out to the garden and called out to her over the fence. Linda, do you have a moment? What is it, Eleanor? Is something worrying you? Mrs. Johnson approached, taking off her soil-covered gloves. I briefly explained the situation. Mrs. Johnson's expression changed to one of surprise and concern. Oh my, what a terrible thing. She frowned. Come to think of it, I did see an unfamiliar car parked earlier. It looked like a police car, but something seemed off about it. My heart raced at this information. What kind of car was it? Mrs. Johnson provided me with details. The make, color, even part of the license plate number. I hurriedly wrote it all down. Thank you, Linda. This is very helpful. Back in the house, I tried calling Mike. But there was no answer. I left several messages on his voicemail, but received no response. Anxiety spread through my chest. Next, I tried calling Sarah, and she answered immediately. What is it, Mom? There was an odd uneasiness in Sarah's voice. Sarah, something serious has happened. It's about Jacob. As I began to explain the situation, Sarah's reaction was strange. Rather than surprise or concern, I sensed something more like panic. I see. But Mom, shouldn't you just do what the police say? I felt uneasy about those words. The normal Sarah would have been much more agitated. Sarah, do you know something about this? No. Nothing. Her voice was trembling. Sorry, Mom. I'm at work right now. I'll call you back later. The call ended. Various questions swirled in my head. Sarah's behavior was clearly unusual. Was she hiding something? Looking at the clock, I realized it was almost time for the fake officers to return. I hurriedly began my preparations. I went over the response methods George had taught me and prepared to gather evidence. I slipped a small voice recorder into my pocket and made sure my phone camera was ready. The doorbell rang. I took a deep breath and headed for the door. In my mind, I organized all the information I had gathered. The suspicious points about the fake officers, Mrs. Johnson's testimony, Sarah's strange reaction. Before opening the door, I steeled my resolve. I had to unravel this mystery and protect my family. For the sake of my grandson Jacob, and for the truth. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, I whispered quietly, "Now, let's reveal the truth." When I opened the door, the two fake officers were standing there as expected. "Mrs. Thompson, have you made your decision?" the older man asked, unable to hide his impatience. Maintaining a facade of calm, I replied, "Yes, I've thought it over. But could you please show me the official warrant?" The two visibly flustered, exchanging glances. "Well, that's..." The younger woman stammered. "And I'd like to see your police badges as well," I said firmly. "We apologize, but we didn't bring them today." "I see. In that case, let me call the station to confirm," I said, reaching for my smartphone. The two panicked. No, that won't be necessary," the older man hurriedly tried to stop me. We'll be leaving now." With that, they hastily departed. I watched their retreating figures with a cold gaze. As I closed the door, I felt my heart racing. This gave me near certainty. But I still didn't have the full picture. That night, I received a call from Mike. "Mom, what's going on? I had a bunch of missed calls from you." I explained the situation. Mike's voice trembled with surprise and anger. "What in the world?" "I'm coming home right away, Mom." After hanging up, I was pondering if I had overlooked anything. That's when I noticed Sarah's smartphone on the living room table. She must have forgotten it in her haste to leave earlier. I hesitated. It's not right to invade someone's privacy. But now, our family's safety was at stake. Taking a deep breath, I picked up the smartphone. When I swiped the screen, it wasn't locked. Looking at the recent call history, I noticed frequent interactions with an unknown number. I pressed one of them, and a voicemail played. "Sarah, proceed as planned." I'll wipe out your debt. This is your chance to outsmart your husband and in-laws. I trembled at the man's voice. Was this the beginning of it all? But why would Sarah do such a thing? I heard the front door open. Mike had returned. "Mom, I'm home." Mike's voice was a mix of exhaustion and worry. After I explained the situation in detail, Mike's expression clouded. "Sarah, what on earth are you thinking?" Just then, the doorbell rang. When we opened it, Mr. Wilson from across the street was standing there. "Eleanor, I'm sorry for coming at this hour. But I think you should see this." What he handed over was footage from a security camera. It showed the fake officers in a secret meeting with Sarah. I thought this looked strange, so I checked it out. Don't you think this is odd? We were speechless. The evidence was clear. At that moment, the front door opened, and Sarah walked in. Her expression froze. "Sarah, can you explain this?" Mike's voice was low, controlled. Sarah collapsed to the floor. "I'm sorry. I'll tell you everything." Her confession began. She revealed her gambling addiction and the massive debt she had accumulated. She spoke of her struggling marriage and her jealousy over Mike's dependence on his parents. Finally, she admitted to being coerced into this scheme by debt collectors who were threatening her. "But I didn't really want to do it. Deceiving my family." Sarah's voice trembled. Mike let out a deep sigh. "Why didn't you talk to me? We could have solved this together." I watched the two of them with mixed emotions. Anger and sadness, but also a bit of relief. At least now, the truth was out in the open. "Well, let's report this to the police," I said quietly. "The real police, this time." With those words, the atmosphere in the room seemed to lighten a bit. A long night was coming to an end. Difficult times lay ahead, no doubt. But now that we knew the truth, we could surely overcome this trial as a family. Looking out the window, I could see the first light of dawn peeking through. It was the start of a new day. And the beginning of a new chapter for our family. As the morning sun began to softly illuminate the room, we heard the sound of police sirens approaching. The real police had arrived. We went out to the front door to greet them. "Thompson family, we apologize for the delay," Detective Johnson, a veteran officer, addressed us. "Please tell us the details of what happened." We took turns explaining the events of the past few days. Sarah's confession, Mr. Wilson's security camera footage, and the actions of the fake police officers. Detective Johnson listened intently with a serious expression. "I see, I understand the situation now," the detective nodded. "Actually, we've been seeing an increase in these types of scams recently. The perpetrators try to exploit family bonds to fraudulently obtain money. In this case, they targeted a 2-year-old child." Hearing those words, we once again realized the gravity of the situation. The unrealistic scenario of an arrest warrant for 2-year-old Jacob was a trap designed to cloud our judgment. "Sarah," the detective gently addressed her. "Your cooperation will be key to solving this case. Can you help us catch the culprits?" Sarah nodded through her tears. Yes, I'll do anything. I don't want to lie anymore. A few hours later, the fake police officers were arrested. They were part of an organized fraud group that used tactics to extort money by exploiting family vulnerabilities. They had used Jacob's name simply because he was the youngest family member. The sheer absurdity of it had the effect of confusing the victim's judgment. Once the immediate crisis had passed, we took time as a family to face each other. We gathered in the living room, sipping tea and discussing things we hadn't been able to talk about before. Sarah, why didn't you come to us sooner? Mike asked quietly. Sarah answered with her head bowed, I was ashamed. Your parents are so wonderful, and I felt like I was a failure as a wife. So I escaped into gambling. I took Sarah's hand. You're not a failure as a wife, dear. Everyone has their own struggles. What's important is that we overcome them together. Mike nodded in agreement. That's right, Sarah. You don't have to bear this burden alone. From now on, let's talk about everything. Sarah's eyes welled up with tears at those words. I'm so sorry. Thank you. We spent a long time talking. About our feelings, our future life, and about Jacob. Slowly but surely, I could feel our family bonds being repaired. A few days later, our neighbors gathered to throw us a small party. Eleanor, you've been through quite an ordeal, Mrs. Johnson said gently. We made it through thanks to everyone's help, I replied, filled with gratitude. Mr. Wilson approached us too. I'm glad that footage was useful. If you ever need anything, just let me know. I felt a warmth in my chest, touched by the kindness of our community. In the middle of the party, Jacob came running to me. Grandma. As I picked him up, I found myself tearing up. We had all come together as a family to protect this child. That night, I stepped out into the garden alone to look at the stars. The events of the past few days flashed through my mind like a slideshow. Fear, anxiety, anger, and finally, the relief and hope that followed. I've never felt the importance of family so strongly before. There's no such thing as a perfect family. But by understanding and supporting each other, we can overcome any difficulty. That's the true strength of family. This ordeal taught me that. From inside the house, I could hear the laughter of Mike, Sarah, and Jacob. I took a deep breath and looked up at the starry sky once more. Thank you, I whispered softly. I'm not sure who I was thanking, but a definite feeling of gratitude spread through my chest. Tomorrow, a new day begins again. I'm sure it won't all be smooth sailing. But I know we can get through it together. As a family, and as members of this warm community. I quietly returned to the house. It I, Barbara Walters, woke up in my Manhattan apartment as the morning sun streamed in. Even at 62, the habits from my days as an ABC News anchor haven't quite left me. As I brew my morning coffee, I gaze out the window at the greenery of Central Park. It's been 2 years since I retired, but I still find myself checking the news every morning. It's Taylor's day today, I smile to myself. It's my scheduled day with Taylor, my 4-year-old angelic granddaughter. I'm looking after her while my son Tom and his wife Rita are busy with work. Sitting at the dining table, nibbling on toast, I reflect on Tom and Rita's recent family situation. Tom is 35, working at an advertising agency in New York City. He's passionate about his work, always searching for new ideas. Rita, 33, teaches at an elementary school in Brooklyn. They both lead busy lives, but lately, I've noticed they seem somewhat tired. And then there's Taylor. Thinking about her makes my heart clench. Taylor has a mild developmental disability, with speech delays and social issues. She was diagnosed a year ago. Since then, Tom and Rita have been desperately searching for special support and therapy programs. Oh, I wish I could do anything for that child, I sighed deeply. The problem is the cost of support. Much of it isn't covered by insurance, and Tom and Rita are struggling financially. With the recession in the advertising industry, Tom's salary hasn't increased, and Rita's teacher's salary isn't enough. I know they're doing their best to manage, but the truth is, their debts are growing. I've offered financial assistance several times, but Tom has refused. "We'll manage on our own, Mom." "Don't worry," he says, and it breaks my heart every time. Tom always tries to put on a brave face for me. It must be his father's pride. I want to do something for Taylor. But I don't know how. Is there a way to help without hurting Tom and Rita's pride? This dilemma weighs on my mind daily. Looking at the clock, I realize it's almost time for Taylor to arrive. I hurry to get ready and start tidying the living room. I set out Taylor's favorite toys and prepare games to aid her development. The doorbell rings, and when I open it, Taylor jumps in with a beaming smile. "Grandma," she exclaims. Seeing that innocent smile makes all my worries disappear. "Welcome, my angel," I say, embracing Taylor. Grateful for the day ahead with her, I make a silent vow. I'll make sure you and your parents are happy. Somehow, I'll find a way. Reassuring myself, I take Taylor's hand and announce the start of our fun day together. 2 weeks after that enjoyable time with Taylor, our family decided to have a barbecue in a park near Lake George on a Sunday. Tom had suggested, "Let's spend some quality family time together." There was an unusual brightness in his voice. He must want to relieve some of the recent tension. We left Manhattan early in the morning. In the car, Taylor was humming excitedly. Seeing her like this, I felt relieved inside. She's usually a woman of few words, but today she seems to be looking forward to it. "Hey, Taylor. I wonder what kind of fish we'll see today?" Rita gently asks. "Fish. Big ones," Taylor replies. At that moment, the car was filled with a warm atmosphere. After about a 3-hour drive, we arrived at our destination. The clear surface of Lake George spread out before us, with the surrounding trees swaying in the wind. The air was crisp, a completely different world from Manhattan. "Taylor can play freely here," I said aloud without thinking. Tom answered while unloading the luggage from the car. "Yes, that's right. It's been a while since I've done something for the family. I hope Taylor enjoys it too." I felt a bit uneasy about his words. Family time. It sounds almost like a duty. But I suppressed that feeling and responded with a smile. "Yes, it's going to be a fun day." As we started preparing for the barbecue, each family member took on a role. Tom was in charge of starting the fire, Rita was setting the table. I started preparing the ingredients. Taylor was picking flowers on the nearby grass. At first glance, it looked like an ideal family holiday. However, upon closer observation, I could sense an underlying tension. Tom's movements were awkward, and Rita's smile seemed a bit forced. There seemed to be more distance between them than usual. "Hey, how should we cook the meat today?" I asked. Tom answered a bit irritably, "It doesn't matter, Mom. Just leave it to me." I flinched for a moment at his attitude. But I didn't want to cause any problems here. Today is a day for family togetherness. As the preparations were in full swing, I was completely absorbed in cooking. While grilling vegetables on skewers, I suddenly realized something. Taylor was nowhere to be seen. "Where's Taylor?" I asked. Rita answered, "She was playing over there just a moment ago." "Tom, did you see her?" Tom shook his head. "No, I was watching the fire." Suddenly, anxiety crossed my mind. We had all been so focused on our tasks that we had taken our eyes off Taylor. "Taylor!" I called out loudly. There was no response. Tom and Rita finally seemed to realize the seriousness of the situation. The three of us started searching the area separately. "Over here." We heard Rita's scream-like voice. We ran towards the lake. What we saw was Taylor's small body floating on the surface of the water. "Taylor!" Tom shouted, stripping off his clothes and jumping into the lake. Rita and I could only watch anxiously from the shore. Seconds later, Tom returned to the shore carrying Taylor. Taylor was unconscious, her face pale. "She's not breathing," Rita cried out. I tried desperately to stay calm. "Call 911. I told Rita, and I began performing CPR on Taylor. "Please, Taylor. Wake up," I called out prayerfully. Tom stood there in a daze. Fear and self-blame were visible in his eyes. When we heard the ambulance siren, Taylor coughed faintly. A glimmer of hope. But we were far from being able to relax. While the paramedics were loading Taylor onto a stretcher, all we could do was watch. Suddenly, Tom shouted, "Mom! Why did you take your eyes off her?" I caught my breath at those words. Should I be blamed? Or Amidst the swirling confusion, regret, and anxiety, the ambulance drove away with Taylor. We were left standing there, unable to say a word. The scenery of Lake George, which should have been beautiful, now felt terrifyingly cold. As the sound of the ambulance siren faded into the distance, we were still standing by the lakeside. It was as if time had stopped. Even after the ambulance carrying Taylor disappeared from view, my eyes remained fixed on the distant road. Why did this happen? Rita's trembling voice broke the silence. She collapsed to her knees and began to sob. Tom was still standing there in his wet clothes, looking dazed. His eyes still held the color of fear and confusion. I took a deep breath. Someone had to stay calm. Rita, it's okay. Taylor is a strong girl, I said gently. Let's think about going to the hospital now. Rita looked up at me. A faint light of hope shone in her tear-filled eyes. Yes, that's right, she answered in a shaky voice. We need to go to Taylor. Tom seemed to have finally come to his senses. I'll get the car ready, he muttered. Then he quickly headed towards the parking lot. I helped Rita stand up and gently put my arm around her shoulder. It's going to be all right. Let's get through this together. However, contrary to those words, anxiety was swirling inside me. Is Taylor safe? Will there be any lasting effects? And why didn't anyone notice? When Tom brought the car around, we hurriedly got in. The car was enveloped in a heavy silence. Which hospital? Tom asked from the driver's seat. Glens Falls Hospital, I answered. That's what the paramedics said. As the car started moving and we headed towards the hospital, Rita kept checking her mobile phone repeatedly. Why hasn't the hospital contacted us? She muttered anxiously. They're probably still running tests, I tried to reassure her. If there's good news, they'll contact us right away. However, those words rang hollow. The tension in the car increased with time. Suddenly, Tom gripped the steering wheel tightly and shouted, "Damn it! Why did this happen?" Rita and I jumped at his voice. Tom's anger and self-blame had burst out all at once. Tom, calm down, I said, trying to reason with him. Focus on driving safely now. But Tom's anger didn't subside. Mom, why did you take your eyes off her? He glared at me in the back seat. You said you would look after Taylor. I caught my breath at those words. Tom, I was also preparing the food. No excuses. Tom yelled. It's your responsibility because you took your eyes off her. The atmosphere in the car froze. Rita looked at her husband with a surprised expression, and I was at a loss for words. Tom, Rita said in a small voice. It's everyone's responsibility. None of us were paying attention to Taylor. However, Tom wouldn't listen. No, Mom said she would watch her. We're busy with work, but Mom has free time. Those words sent a pain through my heart. Tom, that's not. Suddenly, the car came to an abrupt stop. We had arrived at the hospital parking lot. Tom got out of the car and turned to Rita. "We'll go alone." "Mom, you go home." "But, Tom." Rita hesitated. "Just do it." Tom shouted. "That's enough. If Mom is there, our position as parents." He swallowed his words, but their meaning was clear. My presence might call into question their qualifications as parents. Rita looked at me apologetically. "Barbara, I'm sorry. But..." "I understand," I answered quietly. "Let me know how Taylor is doing when you find out." Tom and Rita hurried towards the hospital entrance. I was left alone in the car. Watching them disappear into the hospital through the window, I let out a deep sigh. More than anger or sadness, only emptiness remained. And then, I made a decision. For Taylor's sake, I must uncover the truth, I thought to myself. Left alone in the parking lot of Glens Falls Hospital, I was stunned for a while. However, thinking about Taylor, I couldn't just sit still. I got out of the car and headed towards the hospital entrance. When I asked at the reception, I was told that Taylor was in the intensive care unit. I decided to wait in the waiting room to hear the doctor's explanation. After what felt like a long time, the doctor finally appeared. "Taylor's condition is stable," the doctor said. Fortunately, the oxygen supply to her brain wasn't cut off for a long time. However, the next 24 hours are crucial. I breathed a sigh of relief at those words. However, my relief was short-lived as a police officer entered the waiting room. "We'd like to ask you about the circumstances of the accident," the officer said. I explained the sequence of events, but I noticed that Tom and Rita were nowhere to be seen. When I asked the officer, he said they had already finished giving their statements and left. That's strange, I thought. Why would they leave in such a hurry when their granddaughter's life was in danger? As I answered the officer's questions, a sense of unease grew within me. Tom and Rita's attitude, and the situation they described, something wasn't right. After the questioning was over, I decided to return to the park. There must be something I had overlooked. When I arrived at the park, traces of the barbecue were still there. I looked around, wondering if there were any witnesses. That's when I noticed a family having a picnic nearby. Gathering my courage, I approached them, and they kindly responded. "Yes, we did see a child fall into the water," the father of the family said. "Actually, we were filming my daughter's birthday. It might be in the background of our video." My heart raced. "Would you mind showing that video to the police?" They readily agreed. I immediately contacted the police, and we arranged to check the video. The police officer's expression changed as he watched the footage. "This is an unexpected development." I was also shown the video. What it showed was Tom leading Taylor close to the river. It wasn't an accident. It was intentional. I was speechless with shock. The police officer seized the video as evidence and said he would conduct further investigation. In a daze, I returned to my home in Manhattan. My mind was in turmoil, and my heart was filled with pain. Why would Tom do such a thing? The next morning, I was awakened by the sound of the doorbell. It was the police. "We found new evidence," the detective said. "We'd like to talk to you about the contents of the video." I led them to the living room and listened to the detective's words with bated breath. "We've analyzed yesterday's video in detail," the detective began. "What we found is that this wasn't just an accident." The detective took out a tablet and played the video. The clearer footage showed Tom leading Taylor by the hand to the river and gently pushing her. "Why?" I was at a loss for words. "Furthermore, when we checked your family's bank records, we found that there have been large debts recently," the detective continued. "And Taylor had a high-value life insurance policy." At that moment, all the pieces fell into place. Financial distress, Taylor's medical expenses, and insurance fraud. "I can't believe it," I muttered. Just then, I heard the sound of the door opening. Tom and Rita had returned. I could see their faces turn pale. They froze when they saw the police in the living room. "What happened?" Rita asked in a trembling voice. The detective stood up and said to them, "Mr. Tom, Mrs. Rita. New evidence has been found regarding Taylor's accident." The blood drained from Tom's face. "What do you mean?" The detective showed them the video. While watching the footage, Rita let out a scream, and Tom collapsed into a chair. "Why?" I cried out in tears. "Why did you do this?" Tom covered his face with both hands and began to sob. We had no choice." Rita continued, "We couldn't pay for Taylor's treatment, the debts kept piling up. But to try to kill her," I said, my voice shaking. "We didn't mean to kill her," Tom shouted. "We just needed the insurance money. We only meant to hurt Taylor a little." But I was at a loss for words. I knew about the couple's financial situation, but I never imagined it would come to this. "Why didn't you talk to me?" I said, filled with sadness and anger. Rita answered, crying, "We were ashamed. Our pride got in the way." The detective quietly said, "Both of you will need to come with us to the station." Tom and Rita complied without resistance. As I watched them being taken away, various emotions swirled within me. Anger, sadness, and deep disappointment. Left alone in the room, I stared blankly out the window. The desire to save my family and the anger at their actions conflicted within me. However, one thing was clear. The strong determination that I must protect Taylor. I stood up and began preparing to go to the hospital. The road ahead would be difficult. But for Taylor's sake, and for the future of our family, I must continue to move forward. A few days after Tom and Rita's arrest, I was meeting with a lawyer. The trial of the two, charged with attempted felony and child abuse, was about to begin. "To be honest, Barbara, the situation is dire," the lawyer said. "The evidence is conclusive." I let out a deep sigh. "I understand. But they are Taylor's parents. Isn't there any way to help them?" The lawyer chose his words carefully. "We'll do our best, but prison time is unavoidable. Right now, we should prioritize Taylor." Those words brought me back to reality. Yes, Taylor is the top priority now. The next day, an official from the New York State Child Protective Services (CPS) came to visit. "We'd like to discuss Taylor's future," the CPS official said. "Are you planning to put her in a facility?" I asked anxiously. "Well," the official hesitated a bit. "If care by a blood relative is possible, we believe that would be best." Those words gave me hope. "Would it be possible for me to raise her?" "That's definitely worth considering," the official replied. "However, there will be a rigorous review process." For the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to gain custody. Home visits, psychological evaluations, financial status checks. I cleared each process one by one. At the same time, Tom and Rita's trial was progressing. They pleaded guilty and asked for leniency. The court considered their financial hardship but also pointed out the severity of the crime. In the end, Tom was sentenced to 7 years in prison, and Rita to 5 years. When I heard the verdict, my feelings were complex. Their actions were unforgivable. But they, too, had been suffering. About a month after the trial ended, I received a call from CPS. "Barbara, after our review, we've decided to grant you temporary custody of Taylor," they said. I couldn't help but cry at those words. "Thank you. I'll do my very best to raise Taylor." However, the CPS official added, "But regular supervision and reports will be necessary. And please understand that there may be a reevaluation depending on the situation after her parents are released." I nodded deeply. This wasn't an end, but a new beginning. As I prepared to welcome Taylor, I renewed my determination to provide this child with a safe and loving environment, and to act as a bridge, hoping that one day the whole family could heal and reconnect. It won't be an easy journey. But for Taylor's sake, and for the family's sake, I was prepared to give it my all. Our new life with Taylor began in my Manhattan apartment. The first few weeks were challenging as we adjusted, but gradually a new routine took shape. "Grandma, are we going to the park today?" Taylor asks with a smile at breakfast. "Let's see, we'll go in the afternoon. Remember, we have a doctor's appointment in the morning, okay?" Taylor's face clouds over a bit, but she quickly nods brightly. "Okay, I understand." The regular therapy at the Child Mind Institute was having a remarkable effect on Taylor. Her language skills were improving, and she was gradually developing social skills. I was changing too. I started volunteering at the New York Foundling, supporting children in similar situations. "Barbara, your experience is inspiring many people," a staff member at the facility told me. Indeed, the journey is challenging. But every time I see Taylor smile, I gain strength. And I spend each day hoping that when Tom and Rita return someday, we can start anew as a healed family. A year has passed since then. Squinting at the morning sun streaming through the window, I quietly sip my coffee. Taylor is still asleep. Over this past year, we've overcome many difficulties. My heart ached many times seeing Taylor cry at night or long for her parents. But gradually, she regained her smile, and now she started attending kindergarten. "Grandma, are we going to see Mom and Dad today?" I smiled gently at Taylor's question. "Yes, we are. It's visitation day, isn't it? Monthly visits to the prison." While serving their sentences, Tom and Rita are seriously engaged in counseling and educational programs. Every time I see the regret of the past and new determination in their eyes, my heart fills with complex emotions. They're trying to change, I remind myself. Indeed, the past cannot be changed. But the future is different. Taylor's growth, Tom and Rita's rehabilitation, and my own changes. All of these are shaping a new form of family. Through my volunteer work at the New York Foundling, I've witnessed the rebirth of many families. It should be possible for us too. "Grandma, let's go." Taylor's voice brings me back to the present. As I take her small hand, I make a quiet vow. There will surely be more difficulties ahead. But with love and patience, we can surely overcome them. And someday, we will truly become a family, in every sense of the word. Dreaming of that day, we step out into a new day.